Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just so glad to be here this evening, and it's so nice to get back to the way things used to be a little bit, okay? Tonight, my lecture will be on sculpture, and I'm going to emphasize how you look at sculpture. And we're going to start with Greece. Well, everything starts with the Greeks. We begin with the civilization that formalized the ideals of beauty that are the standard by which beauty and proportion are judged today. The Greeks had three periods of growth in art. First was the Archaic Age, then the Golden Age, which went from a period of around 480 to 450 BC, and finally the Hellenistic Age, when the Greeks had been conquered by Rome, but the Romans greatly admired the Greek aesthetic, and they began bringing copies of statues and whatnot to Rome, and they emphasized with the architecture and with the building in Rome, and so the Romans really embraced the Greek aesthetic. Now, the ideals codified by the Greeks in sculpture and in architecture have endured and continue to influence our aesthetic, our artistic aesthetic even today. And when you think of, for example, the homes of, let's say, Thomas Jefferson, influenced by the Greek aesthetic. Now we're going to start looking at some of the Greek sculptures. And here I have three of them, because they represent various periods of the Greek culture and the aesthetic. The first one on the left is an archaic statue that they refer to as kouros. The kouros are the youthful statues, the youthful boys, figures generally to have been thought to be the statues of Apollo, famed for his great beauty. These figures are based on Egyptian statues. For example, the flat feet, the rigidity of them goes back to Egypt. Also, you notice the hands are in a fist. That also refers goes back to Egypt. Now, the nudes are striding forward. There is a stone cut out between the legs, as you can see, right here, and the head is rather small and has stylized curls, which actually add as a support to the neck, because those are the parts of the statue that are most prone to break. The head, the arms, the legs. This is why we see so many Greek and Roman sculptures that are incomplete because of the breakage. Now, the youth himself has his eyes closed. His arms are, again, the rigidity, the very slimness of the torso, and also he's stepping forward. Now, most of these statues, they strive for an ideal beauty, but they have yet to refine it, according to what Kenneth Clark says. He said, Apollo is not yet beautiful, though he is ideal. These figures look alike, so they are monotonous and almost look as if the parts were done independently and then screwed together. Now, the second one, the Kritios Youth. This one is, as you can see, it has been refined a little bit. The smoothness of the marble, the fact that the eyes are open and the head is turned a little bit to give a little bit of animation to the body. The hair is curled, and it is no longer the long ringlets that we saw. And I want you to look at the delineation of the body, how much stronger that delineation actually is, especially in the chest area. Now, the line from the smooth transition also of body parts. Now, the line from the hip to the groin was to remain in Greek statuary. Also notice the smooth transition to the various body parts, as I've said. Now, the next one is the Charioteer of Delphi. The body here is hidden by a columnar skirt. It looks very much like a column. But there are soft folds of drapery around the chest, and actually you get the impression that there is a body underneath. And look at his expression, an expression of concentration. A man of action. In other words, he's a man of action ready to move. Now, let's look at some of the statues in the Golden Age. There were three sculptors in the Golden Age, the Golden Triumvirate, Lysippos, Praxiteles, and also Scopas. Here is Lysippos. It's called the Apoxamenos, and the Apoxamenos means the scraper. It shows an athlete who has just finished a race and is scraping himself with his sturgill. It was a metal piece, and the way they would clean themselves, they were perspiring after the race or whatever they did, and they would oil themselves and then scrape off the oil with the scraper that he is using. Now, this, of course, in the days before soap. So I want you to look at his legs. He has, one of the legs is at rest. His weight is resting on the left leg, and the right leg is at rest. Now, you will also see a little bit of a bump on the right leg. That is because there was a strut there, and the strut was attached to something else in order to stabilize and strengthen the leg. You will see this in some other statues that I will show you. And there is also a strut in the back. You can see that between the legs. That's a strut in the back to hold the statue. So as you can see, this statue has fared quite well. Because we see it in its entirety. Now, also look at his expression. The hair is a bit messed because he was running a race, and his mouth is open and he looks out. So in other words, there is a sense of animation about the figure. Now, the neck and arm muscles are very clearly seen. The arms are engaged in action, and the figure is lighter. The head of the figure is now much lighter. It's according to the Greek canon of proportion, the head is 1/8 the size of the body. So in other words, it is in proportion. Now, so we call this the canon of ideal proportions, and I'm going to show you a picture in a few minutes explaining what I'm talking about. Now here is another Lysippos. It's called the Victorious Youth. This is one of the few original bronzes or original marbles. Many of the sculpture that I'm showing you are Roman copies of Greek originals. There are very, very few Greek originals. For example, Lysippos was very prolific. He did, by what we have been able to deduce, 1,500 statues, but have been attributed to him. But we only have one original. All the others are Roman copies, because the Greeks had studios, and the Romans took the statues from the Greeks, and then they established their own studios in Rome. So if you wanted a Lysippos, you wanted a Victorious Youth, you would go to the gallery, or not the gallery so much, but the workroom of a man who would do you one of these duplicates in marble. Now, this one happens to be a bronze, and you can see it looks a bit weathered. Well, it was been weathered because it spent probably close to 1,000 years on the bottom of the Mediterranean. It was discovered in 1964, by Italian fishermen in international waters. Now, this is important because that statue was then sold to the Getty in California. The Getty Museum is very heavily endowed, and they could actually buy anything they want because they've got so much money in their endowment. Now, the Greeks have demanded that it be sent back to them. Well, it really wasn't, it was a Greek statue, but it was on its way to Rome when there was something happened to the boat. There must have been a storm or whatever, and the boat sunk with this statue on it, and it was found in 1964. So the Greeks really don't have a call for this, because if it's in international waters, yeah, you have no case at all. So as I said, this is now in the Getty, and as you can see, considering the the history of it, it's in rather good condition, except of course for the weathering of the bronze. But we do see it in one piece, and we do get an idea of the kind of things that Lysippos did. Now here is a statue by Praxiteles called Hermes and the infant Dionysus. Now here you see the infant Dionysus is sitting on Hermes arm, and there is also here a support, and there is the strut holding the figure, so that the again providing it with a little bit of strength and of substance. Now, also notice the feet. Now, the feet, they are not straight flat on the ground. The right leg is holding, and the left leg is in repose. And of course, the infant Dionysus reaches toward Hermes. This is an original, by the way. This is one of the original Greek statues. The legs below the knees have been restored, but the marble has become flesh. Notice the dimpling of the abdomen. He originally, by the way, held a bunch of grapes for which the infant Dionysus is reaching for. Dionysus was the god of wine and revelry. And as again, the strut and the drapery give it stability and guard against breakage. But it is very graceful and very relaxed. Now here is my favorite, Skopas. This is called Meleager. Skopas had a way of showing sensuous lips and deep eyes cast in a shadow. The turn of the head with the parted lips convey an almost romantic expression of longing. The style is very emotional and very powerful. Notice also how the hair is in disarray, which also conveys emotion as well. And with all of Skopas is very readily identifiable, because all of his heads have this beautiful sense of longing and yearning for something else. So this is one way we can identify the work of Skopas. Now here is another one. This is another sculpture by Skopas called the Maenad. Now the Maenad were female followers of the cult of Dionysus, who danced in orgiastic rituals, and they would wear this very diaphanous drapery. We see here a tension in the head with the body thrust back and the arched back as well. The drapery, we call it wet drapery, even though it really isn't wet, but the drapery looks wet and it clings to the body, and the parts as parts at the left hip. So as she steps forward, we look at the hair. The wavy tendrils of the hair also suggest motion, totally unique and totally filled with emotion. And again, the Greeks were masterful at this use of drapery to hide, to hide and yet reveal the human body. Because to the Greeks, the human body was the ideal. After all, it was the creation of God. What could be nicer than that? Now here is another one. Here is another one of these action figures. And if you look closely at his hand, right here, you will see that there is a strut there to protect the hand so that the hand will not break. And that's the reason why the sculpture is complete. Also in the back, there is another strut which holds the figure, as you can see. Now this is Maryann the Discobolus. Maryann perfected the body in action, the ideal pattern of athletic energy. There is tension with energy about to be released. The lack of drapery defines the movement, and we see tension in the musculature. Look at how he has delineated the man's ribs. You can actually see the delineation there, and you can see also in his arm, the back arm that's thrust back. You can see the line, the muscular line of the muscle right there. So in other words, the Greeks are perfecting. They know that the human body has muscles and bone underneath, and that this, with certain movements of the body, these features can be shown. And again, there was also now a torsion the body is partially turned, and you get a sense of movement, of action, of animation, which you did not see in the Kouros, the first statue I showed you. There was absolutely no animation whatsoever, and his eyes were closed. So there really was, like he was sleepwalking. Okay, now, here is the Nike adjusting her sandal. This relief, now we don't know who did this, but this relief has movement, grace, with swags of drapery emphasizing the body. The S-curve in the body from one shoulder to the other. One shoulder is lower because she is adjusting her sandal. The other shoulder is higher. Unfortunately, the face is gone. Now, when we talk about a relief, what we mean is a sculpture which is still attached to the background. Most of the other sculptures I've shown you have been freestanding. But this is attached to the background. And we are going to talk more about a freestanding statue and how one should actually look at this. You would look at this straight on. You wouldn't walk around it because there's nothing to see on the back. It's simply flat. And it's still attached, as I told you, to the background. But what we do see, we can see her legs through the drapery. They can still reveal the shape of her legs, which was so masterful of what the Greeks could actually do. Now here's another one called the Venus of Canados. Pliny, in the 1st century Rome, wrote of this work and gives the only description of the eruption of Vesuvius to which he was an eyewitness. The model was supposedly a woman whose name was Phryne. The original believed to be that of Praxiteles. They believed that Praxiteles did the original of this. This is not the original, however. She sheds her shift and enters the bath and is not pretending any false modesty. There are 49 copies of this which exist. The statue was originally enshrined on the island of Canados for 500 years. And we know this because it was written up in the ancient Greek texts, and the shrine was visited by poets, kings, and tourists as well. Now here is another one from the Hellenistic period. We're going into the Hellenistic period now, where things become far more emotional. And we're going to see things, for example, like this, the dying Gaul. Now, we know that this figure is not Greek because he is wearing a torque in his neck. And the barbarians, or the ones from beyond the Roman Empire, would wear things like that, and that denotes that he is not really a Roman or a Greek. It was done by Epigonus, but it is a man who has been wounded in battle and is obviously dying. He is seated, and he is slowly passing away and trying to staunch the blood that flows from his wound. So, but again, you see the delineation of the legs, you see the hair, the strength of the hair. You can also see the kind of a pained expression on his face. But it's just absolutely marvelous, truly is. Now, this one, oh my, the winged victory of Samothrace. That's an iconic sculpture. One of the most famous Hellenistic sculptures in the whole world. The windswept figure steps forward boldly. Notice her head is gone, unfortunately, and so are her arms. But she steps forward. The wings are balanced by the thrust of the breasts and the torso and the forward movement of the body. The drapery swirls around her. Look at how it comes on one side, because the wind is blowing. So consequently, the drapery is blowing as well. And the wings and whatnot, and there she stands on the top of the staircase in the Louvre in Paris. She has been there since 1884. But she was taken away for a little while. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to show you another, shall we say, iconic figure. Here she is with Audrey Hepburn in Givenchy, walking down the steps, and she never looked down. I tried it. I was there. I said, let me see if I can walk down those steps without looking down. I couldn't do it. Could not do it. Now, this was in a movie. Audrey Hepburn, does anyone know the name of the movie? It was Funny Face, called Funny Face. And as she's walking down, she says, with that beautiful Givenchy, take the picture. To whom was she saying, take the picture? Who was the photographer? The photographer in the movie, of course. Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire was the one who was the photographer in the movie. And of course, there are two iconic figures. There is the Venus of Samothrace, and there is Audrey Hepburn. And she always wore Givenchy, even in her first movie in Charade, always wore Givenchy. And she basically made Hubert de Givenchy. She made him famous. But I just had to include this to see two iconic figures like that. One from the ancient world, one from the modern world, together for that one fleeting moment. Now, as I told you, that statue has been there since 1884. But for a while, she wasn't there, because in 1940, they had to remove her. How do you remove a statue like this? She had to be removed because, of course, we know what was happening. The Nazis were marching into France, and they had to do something mighty fast. So they jimmy rigged. I mean, this looks to me like just 3 2x4s or whatever, you know. They jimmy rigged something, some kind of a cage, to lower it so that I don't know where in heaven's name they put it. It's a huge statue. I honestly don't know. I don't know where it was placed. I would love to find that out. But they removed her in 1940, and there you can see it coming down. And on June 21st, just a month after the war ended, she was placed back. And this is another reason for art. Because when this goes back, all the French people know, hey, things are going to be all right. They've put the Venus of Samothrace back. Everything's going to be okay. And this is one of the functions of art, because this is so iconic. It is so beloved by everyone in the world. It should be in the place where it has been for more than 130 years. And this is another function of art that we don't think about. Can you imagine the Metropolitan Museum of Art without Rembrandt's, without any Rembrandt paintings in it, or with things just disappeared? We can't imagine that. We can't imagine the Aristotle contemplating the bust of Homer not being in that particular gallery in the Metropolitan in New York, where we could go and see it. So this is another one of the functions of art, very, very much so, to make us see that everything is going to be all right and things are going to be back to normal again. All right, now, here's the next Venus, the Venus de Milo. She was found on the island of Milos in 1820 in pieces. The pieces were taken and put together very, very, in a very clumsy manner. And this poor statue was traded through so many hands. They wrote a book about it, and I read the book, and after a while, it was traded from one person to another until it finally arrived at the museum. I believe it's in the Louvre right now. She is the embodiment of ideal beauty to this very day. Despite the emphasis today on ultra-thinness, she's not ultra-thin. She looks quite normal. Again, the head is quite small, as I told you. The head is small with the Lysipian body proportions, and we can see that she's lost her arms. However, through the drapery, you can see her leg, you can see her knee bulging out. The arms, unfortunately, are lost, but it is just an ideal, just an absolutely lovely, lovely statue. And this, now here is the Laocoon. The Greek ideal of beauty, now this is Roman, the Greek idea of beauty has become a reality of emotion and suffering. This is the height of Hellenistic emotion. The father and the two boys are being attacked by an enormous serpent. The father continues to fight off the snake, but the boy on the left has completely given up while the boy on the right is still struggling. And when you look at this, it's all twisted and contorted. Look at the expressions on the father's face, twisting and contortion, and the snake seems to have been woven in and out of all of their limbs, and it in a sense, the snake unites the three of them. The snake unites the three of them. And they are all suffering, and of course, they will all be killed. So this is not Greek. This is Roman, all right? The Hellenistic idea of the Hellenistic, shall we say, emotion over the top. Now I want to show you another relief here. This is Greco-Roman. That is to say, it is derived from the Greeks, was done by the Romans. It's the three Maenads. In other words, the Maenads, the relief sculpture of three Dionysic dancers, which I mentioned before. But look at the beautiful way that dramatic drapery conceals and yet reveals their bodies and their movement. It's a wonderful pattern of sweeping drapery in swirls and twirls and it's just absolutely lovely. And you notice that every one of them, the drapery varies a little bit. It is not a repeat of one after the other. The drapery varies from the first one. She has a cape on, which obviously is fluttering in the breeze. The one in the middle, we see her leg clearly through the drapery, which is blown in one direction. And then the other one has turned her back, has turned opposite the other two, and look at the swirls of drapery and the whirls and the swirls of drapery. It's just absolutely mesmerizing, and I love looking at this. And when you go to the Metropolitan Museum, and if you go to the Greek and Roman sculpture, you will see reliefs like this, and they are, of course, and they're in marble, and the lighting is so perfect in the Met, and it's just mesmerizing to look at it, and to think that this was all carved out with a chisel and a little hammer. And maybe afterward they used a little bit of pumice or something to smooth it out, because pumice was available at that time. But to my mind, it's just, it's mesmerizing. You can't take your eyes off of it. It's just that wonderful. Now, this is the diagram I said I was going to show you, the facial proportions diagram. It illustrates the ideal face as codified by the Greeks and by the golden mean, which is a mathematical number, that is to say 1.618033988, and it goes on and on. The number goes on for about 16 digits, all right? Now, the horizontal part of the face is divided into thirds: the forehead, the midsection, and then from the mouth down. The blue square goes from the eye pupils to the corners of the mouth, forming a square. Vertically, the face is divided into 5 sections. You can read those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Quite clearly. Now, the distance between the width of the eyebrows and the width of the nose should be the same. That is part of the ideal canon of proportion. The heart-shaped face is considered ideal also. The 2 front incisor teeth form a golden rectangle with a pi ratio of the height to the width. In other words, it is a perfectly proportioned face. Very, very few of us have a perfectly proportioned face. But models, and I believe this is Paulizan, if I'm not mistaken, a picture of Paulizan, and again, it's the facial proportions are absolutely perfect. Now, I'm going to show you something that was done in the 20th century, which, again, we still go back to the Greeks when we want to express ideals of government, ideals of decency, and ideals which are generally accepted by civilized people. In 1906, Teddy Roosevelt wanted a new $20 gold coin. And he commissioned the sculptor, and he wanted it the coin to reflect American democracy. And he commissioned Augustus St. Gaudens to do the design. St. Gaudens went back to the Greek, and it is considered the most beautiful American coin ever struck. St. Gaudens designed it, and it was struck in 1907, but St. Gaudens never saw it because he had died already. He was very sick, and he had died already. So the first year that was struck was 1907. And what we can see is Liberty striding forward. Notice the drapery. The drapery is blown back because she's striding forward. She holds a torch in one hand, and in the other, she holds an olive branch, the symbol of peace. And if you look very closely, in the lower left-hand corner, you will see the dome of the Senate. Again, reflective of our democracy. The dome of the Senate is there. And on the obverse, well, it's Liberty, and now, the coin was struck in 1907, and in 1908, the motto, "In God We Trust," was added on the reverse side. So some of the coins, when they were first struck, did not have "In God We Trust," but in 1908, they added "In God We Trust." Thus, the 1908 coins without the motto are far rarer than those with the motto, okay? Now, the striding figure of Liberty with flowing drapery and the olive branch relate again to Hellenistic sculpture. The model, by the way, I must tell you this is very interesting. We found out who the model was a few years ago. Her name was Hetty Anderson. She was a light-skinned black woman who posed not only for St. Gaudens, but for other sculptors as well. And also, she also posed as the goddess of victory that's in the Grand Army Plaza in New York City, which commemorates the Civil War victory. So she was Hetty Anderson, and of course these things are now appearing because of the interest in black history and also the interest in women's history also. So that's very, very interesting that she was used by a number of artists, a number of sculptors, as the posing for these works. Now we're going to go ahead to the Italian Renaissance. Now, between the fall of the Roman Empire and the Italian Renaissance was known as the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages abandoned the Greeks and the Romans because, after all, they weren't Christians. They were non-believers. So you would not have gone artistically. You would have not gone back and used the aesthetics of the Greeks and the Romans because, again, they were simply non-believers. Now, in the Renaissance, however, the Renaissance saw a renewal of interest in Greek and Roman forms of statuary and in architecture and also in literature. This would have been unthinkable during the medieval period. Humanism looked to the philosophy of Aristotle, where there was a curiosity about nature and science. Think, for example, of Leonardo da Vinci and his notebooks, where he would go and draw, and the water was flowing over the rocks, and he would draw the flow of the water over the rocks. Or think of Brunelleschi and his dome in Florence, all based on Greek proportions. Or think of, let's say, Botticelli and his Birth of Venus, the Venus coming in, the beautiful painting of the Birth of Venus. This would not have been done during the medieval period. It was all religious painting. And painting of that sort would have been considered pagan art. But in the Renaissance, it was admired. The Greeks suddenly were again, the Greek aesthetic and the Greek ideals and the Greek stories of the Greeks, the Greek gods and goddesses were again incorporated into European art. Now, so this is the reason I'm going to start with this one, Donatello's Donatello's David. Again, here we see the interest in the Greek and the Roman statuary. Now, man is the measure of all things. This David was the first freestanding nude since antiquity and was to be viewed in the round. Now, when I say in the round, this is placed in the middle of the gallery and you are supposed to walk around it. And when you look at something like this, you are supposed to think of the air around it as being palatable, something you can touch. You know you can't touch the air, but you've got to pretend that you can. Because you then look at the negative spaces, because that completes the art, that completes the work of art. For example, if you look at David's left arm, and you look at the negative spot, you see that a triangle is created by that movement. When you look at his right arm, you will see that he is holding a sword which looks a little bit too heavy for him, okay? But there is also a negative space there, and the arm and the sword kind of, from the shoulder down to the end of the sword, kind of has a curve in it, so that he's embraced by that curve. You don't see his face because he's wearing like a hat, a sun hat. So, and his head, he's looking downward. Now, the body is that of a youth, very, very slim and very, very unmuscular. Look at how slim his arms are. And as I said, that sword looks almost too heavy for him to pick up, and yet with it he killed the giant Goliath. Now, there is also a sense of contrapposto. The shoulder of the weight-bearing leg is lower. For example, the weight-bearing leg here is the right shoulder, and the shoulder is lower, while the other shoulder is raised. When you stand on one leg, one shoulder goes up, the other shoulder goes down, okay? So this is Donatello's David, and it was what proved to be an iconic piece for all the sculptors that came after him. Now here is the Michelangelo, the Great Bruges Madonna. It is a self-contained oval composition, almost almond shape. The child is contained within the mother's legs, alluding, of course, that is, of course, a birth illusion. He clings to her, and notice that the drapery from his head all the way down to his feet, he's enclosed in the mother's drapery, as if she's trying to protect him. But you can see at the very bottom that his little right foot is kind of reaching out into space like he has to step out. He knows he's going to have to leave the protection of his mother, and that one day he's going to have to start a journey that's going to last for 3 years, with him preaching and going around the world, around the area of the Middle East, and preaching and being followed by disciples. And in a sense, knowing what was ultimately going to happen to him. And of course, Mary, look at Mary's expression. She has a book in her lap, which is a book of scriptures. And of course, the book of scriptures would tell her what was going to happen to her son. And she looks very sad. It's a beautiful, beautiful work of art, and tells so much about the relationship of a child with his mother. This is meant, by the way, was meant to be placed above eye level so that the onlookers in the Church of Bruges can look at the expression of the child and the mother as well. Now here is Michelangelo's other. This is the Michelangelo Pieta. Mary holds her dead son in her lap. And the left hand says it all. That one gesture says it all. The drapery follows the contours of the Christ's body and forms a base, the base of the composition. And again, using this loose drapery, this huge gathering of drapery, which even here comes up to the side and is under his arm. So our eyes move that way. And the sculpture itself is actually a pyramid. It's a pyramid with the base and the apex of the pyramid being the head of Mary. Now, there is a textual contrast also between the hair, the skin, and the drapery. This is the only work he ever signed. That was a question about 2 or 3 months ago on the final Jeopardy. What is the name of the only sculpture that Michelangelo signed? And it was the Pieta. And it was signed because there was another rival of Michelangelo called Bandinelli, Baccio Bandinelli. And he said, oh, that's not a Michelangelo. So Michelangelo went back to the church, and Mary wears a ribbon right here. And that's where he signed it. He chiseled in his name. Now, there was also something else. There was also a lot of, I'm going to show you one more picture here. Now look there is a picture of Christ who was about 33 when he was killed. And there is a picture of Mary. And Michelangelo was criticized because they said, well, look, how can a woman who has a 33-year-old son look so young? And Michelangelo wrote a very, very detailed reply because he was angry at that. And the gist of the reply was that women who retain their purity and decency also retain their beauty into their old age. Because Mary would have been, she would have been about close to 50 there, and in those days, of course, that was considered quite old. But her face is so young, and it is so pure, and it is so serene and so calm. And this was Michelangelo's retort to the criticism of the face of Mary. Now, let's look at another David, the Michelangelo David. To the Renaissance, to the onlooker in the Renaissance, the path through truth was to individual expression. That is, the universe could only be understood through the particular. You understood the universe by looking at a tree. You understood the universe by looking at one star. Now, this is a monumental-sized sculpture. It is 18 feet tall and magnifies the physical proportions, while the turn of the head with the tousled hair and the furrowed brow suggest a marshaling of his courage prior to the fateful throw. There is solidity of form. Look at the body. The body is solid. It is muscular. You know that there are muscles and bones, etc., under that skin. There is also a twist of the wrist in the hand. That is also seen in many of Donatello's statues. But I'm going to show you now. You can see also there is a strut behind, which acts as a support. I'm going to show you now this. There is the expression on his face. In other words, it is not the man of action, it is the contemplative David, just before he has to make the final blow, and he realizes if he doesn't score a hit, his life is in danger, and that Goliath will definitely kill him. Look at the hair. The hair is all tousled. In other words, it reflects what's going on in his head. And that Michelangelo has drilled out the eyes, making him much more penetrating as he looks. The brow, look at the brow, look at his forehead, very furrowed, very, very worried. He only has this little sling with a rock in it. How can he possibly win against this gigantic man? But we know what happened. Now there also is the hand. Look at the way Michelangelo has managed to create the tendons that are right under the hand, even to the tendons that are in the arm. Many men have, when they exercise, they have tendons like that, and you can see them. And that's why I'm showing you the picture there of the hand. Now we are going to see some more Davids today. And I want you to try to remember his face, because we're going to see something else, and we're going to make a contrast between Michelangelo's David and another David that I will show you in a few moments. Now we are going to move to the Italian Baroque period. And I'm going to start with a sculpture that is at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and that you can go to see, and it is an absolute marvel. It was done by a man named Gianlorenzo Bernini when he was 18 years old, and he collaborated with his father on this. Now, Bernini lived to be 89, which was, really Methuselah in those days. And how many of you have ever been to Rome? Anyone here? Oh, good. Well, the Rome that you know and the Rome that you have seen is primarily the fertile imagination of Gianlorenzo Bernini. The churches, St. Andro del Valle, the St. Lucy, the Piazza Navona with the fountain, and the two churches behind it, all Bernini. I'm going to show you a number of Bernini's works, but I'm not going to, won't be able to show you all of them because we would be here till midnight, okay? Because he continued working throughout his entire life, so that he had a huge, huge output of architecture and sculpture, and it absolutely marvelous. And again, he kept on working until the very bitter end, and he started his father, but his father was also an architect and a sculptor, but the son was outshone the father in every way, shape, or form. Now, this is called The Faun Teased by Children from 1616. Now, a faun, F-A-U-N, is from Roman mythology, and it was a figure close to a satyr. They generally lived in the woods, and they generally hung around with, let's say, Silenus, the god of drunkenness, and they also accompanied Apollo when they had revelries in the woods and whatnot. This is what the ancient Romans believed. Now, the textual differentiation here between the flesh, the tree bark, the fruit, and the foliage is absolutely phenomenal. Now, you notice that the tree bark is leaning forward, okay? That gives it a little bit of motion, And then the faun has raised one leg and is resting it on the branch of the tree. Meanwhile, there's a lot going on here. Meanwhile, now this is something you have to walk around, okay? You cannot get the full impact of it if you just stand in front of it and look at it. Now, if you notice right there, his foot on the tree branch forms a triangle. Below that, there is another foot. I'm going to show you the other side of the sculpture. There is a child's foot, and again, another negative spot is created. So let me move to the next view now. On the opposite side, there we see a lioness eating the grapes, and over her back is sliding one of the little putti. We call those little scampy little children, they're called putti, P-U-T-T-I. And we can also see, again, that those patterns are there. You can also see another space between the faun's body and where he is holding on to another part of the tree. Now, let me do this last picture and show you that there are, at the apex, there are two putti with their arms around each other, and one of them is smiling and the other one is sticking his tongue out at the faun. Obviously, Bernini knew what kids do, and little kids will stick their tongues out, right? So obviously, he must have really, really looked at what do these kids do? Well, they scamper around, which they really do. And that little boy there is scampering over the back of a lioness, and she doesn't even know it's happening, okay? Kids scamper around and crawl around like that, and here they are making fun of the faun, while the faun reaches for the tree, and one of them sticks his tongue out, but the other one has gotten the faun's hair in his hand, in his fist. So, but it is just so arresting. And to think of the textural qualities that he manages to achieve with a piece of marble. Absolutely phenomenal. Fortunately, this is at the Metropolitan Museum, and every time I see it, I walk around it. I took all these pictures, by the way. I walk around, I said, my God, it's fantastic. It really, really is just marvelous. And funny, when you see the kid with the tongue, making a raspberry, it's funny. And it's okay, by the way, it's okay to laugh at art. It is perfectly okay. If it makes you smile and makes you laugh, it's marvelous. And there's nothing wrong with laughing at it, because that's half the fun. Sometimes an artist will deliberately do something. I think of Jan Steen, the Dutch painter. Every time you look at his paintings, you want to laugh at what's happening. But this is really funny, and you don't discover it until you actually look at those two kids and see what they're doing. And the other one is crawling all over, and this guy is totally at the mercy of those two kids. And the lioness who's sitting at the bottom, but she's happy because she's getting to eat something. Okay, so thank goodness this is at the Metropolitan, because we can go there and we can enjoy it. Now, here is another one. This is another Bernini sculpture. Bernini, like I said, I don't think that man ever slept. He probably didn't go to bed. All right, this is another Bernini. This is in Rome. The Apollo and Daphne. He was a prolific sculptor and painter. Yes, he also painted. The Baroque ideals of strong emotional content and intense religiosity, because the Counter-Reformation Council of Trent set forth the rules of expression that artists had to use to conform to in their religious painting. Now, the myth of Daphne is that she was pursued by Apollo, but she wasn't interested in him. So she begs Zeus for some help, and he turns her into a tree. Now, Bernini takes the moment when Apollo reaches Daphne, and just as she's turning into a tree, notice that the bark is growing up along her body, and as she holds her arms up and her hands are out, the hands are becoming the branches of the tree. And we get a sense of movement because her body is kind of at a curve, and he has reached her, but notice that his drapery is blowing back. He must have been running very, very quickly to get to her, but Daphne could run faster than he could. So that's the reason why she's now being transformed into the tree, which we call the Daphne tree. But notice too the quality of the workmanship. The smoothness of her skin, the more muscular on his side, the base, which is really like they're running through the woods, or they're on some rocks or something of that sort, and then the hands, which are turning into the branches and the leaves of a tree. And of course, look at the bark of the tree. The bark of the tree is a little bit rough, in contrast to her legs, which are very smooth. And look at her expression. Her hair has been blowing in the wind, it's all messy, and her mouth is open, and it's very, very taut with emotion. And the hair too is as emotional as the expression on her face. Now here's another one of Bernini's, also another sculpture. The Rape of Persephone, the powerful figure of Pluto abducting the writhing Persephone to the underworld. The tension is seen in her legs, an outstretched arm. Again, these outstretched arm, the gesture, the gestures to protect herself. It was said, Bernini said that he could paint in marble, and he certainly was a master at it. His work is meant to be walked around. You've got to walk around his work and to look at all the patterns created by the negative space. Look at the leg of Pluto. Look at the leg of Pluto. It creates a triangle, does it not? Now, I'm also going to show you something else here. Look at his hand on her hip. He's actually indenting into the flesh. Bernini knew that people have, when you touch their arms, the flesh goes in, all right? There's fat there. There's a layer of fat. And he has managed to create that in marble. Now, that is very difficult to do and make it believable. Also, the smoothness of her body versus his hands on her. And you notice all the shadows. That's the reason Baroque sculpture is so wonderful, because all of these various movements create shadows, and the shadows make it almost mysterious, just absolutely beautiful. Now, let's look at let's look at Bernini's David. We saw Michelangelo's, let's look at Bernini's. The man of contemplation has become the man of action. Now, the man of action is about to complete his throw. In other words, David has made up his mind, it's now or never. And what we have is the torsion, the twist, and the stance of the body. Look at how his mouth, the grim, his lips are pursed together because he's trying to get enough energy, get enough momentum, all right? And the drapery, look at how the drapery swirls around him. From one side through the legs, down, because meanwhile, you can see in this picture on the right, there he is with the sling, and he's ready to throw the rock. Now again, when you look at the picture on the right, I put that there deliberately. This is in full light, but when you look from that side, you see all these varying shadows. But you get a lovely, wonderful sense of movement and dynamism and torsion and energy being projected. And I'm going to show you now just the faces. Michelangelo's David and Bernini's David. Right, now here. All right, this is the full length. Now you see David's energy. You don't see that he's a man of contemplation. He's thinking about it. He's still trying to screw up his courage. But the man in the right has already screwed up his courage and is ready to fight to the death. Now I'm going to show you. I'm sorry. I thought I had. I have to put two pictures here of his face and his face. And I thought I had it here, but I don't. I'm sorry. But you saw here the look on his face. Just the tension in the mouth alone tells you so much. Because when people are upset, or when something is happening, or when they're in great pain, you see the pain on their face. Or the tension, you can see the tension on the face. Now, this is Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers. He also did this, and it is a plethora of running water. There is here there is the papal crown and the papal coat of arms, because it was done under the aegis of one of the popes, and it's the Fountain of the Four Rivers, with a crowned by a towering Egyptian obelisk, creating a breathtaking outdoor space. Because in Rome, you know, there are a number. There's even the Fontana di Trevi. There are many fountains in Rome. But this one, when I first went to Rome, I sat down at a cafe and I had a cappuccino in front of that statue. And believe me, it was worth the flight of Rome just to be able to do that. It really, really was. It was phenomenal. Now, there is a massive outcropping of stone, and at each corner there is a river god, a god representing the river. A river, the Rhine, the Ganges, the Nile, and the De la Plata River. The papal tiara and keys refer to the unifying force of the church. Naturally, the papacy had to get their little how can I describe it? The papacy had to have their place into this particular work of art. Now, the flow of water over the rocks creates a unity, and the detail here that I'm going to show you is the allegorical figure of the Nile with a veil drawn over his face, symbolic of the fact that the source of the Nile was not known. But look at the kind of shadows it creates. It's just absolutely marvelous. It truly, truly is. And you get a strong sense of motion as you walk around it, a very strong sense. And of course the water is splashing, and the last time I saw it, it was not so pleasant because the mob, it was a massive amount of people, and they were pumping in rock music. And it was thumping to shake your eardrums. And I felt that the sound of the water is more than enough. You don't have to pump in rock music. But obviously, some of the tourists like the rock music, so that's what they did. I don't know if they're still doing that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Now, this is one of the last things I'm going to show you. First of all, in the back is the Plaza. This is in the Plaza of Minerva, and the Maria Sopra Minerva is the church behind, and inside that church there is also another Bernini sculpture, okay? Now, many of these obelisks, as I told you, were brought from Egypt at that time. There's a number of them, beside the one in the Piazza Navona. This is the one, this is right where the Pantheon, between the Pantheon and the museums of the Minerva Church, there is a square, and this obelisk is there. Bernini did the sculptures for all of these obelisks, and in this case, he put a baby elephant on the plinth, and the baby elephant is supporting the Egyptian obelisk. But it was so sad because there is a lot of pollution in Rome, and the poor little elephant was turning black from pollution. And you could see he's wearing one of those little howdahs, one of those little, like a little blanket, and you can read each individual tassel. It's beautifully done. But if they don't do something to clean that statue, within a few years, in fact, I'm sure it has deteriorated even more. I first saw this around 2004 or 2005. I met my friends there. No, a little bit later than that, about 2008. I met my friends from New Zealand were coming to Rome, and I decided to meet them, and so I joined them in Rome. And when I looked at that, I felt so sad. And why can't somebody do something about it? Because it was blackened with soot. I'm going to show you another picture that I took, and you can see it here. You can see it on his face. This was taken a little later in the day, but you can still see the blackness on that poor little elephant. I felt so sorry for it. It's only a sculpture, but I really felt bad. And it was so creative to put it on the back of a little elephant. To my mind, it was such a creative way of addressing where you're going to put that obelisk on the back of an elephant, of course. Now, we are going to start talking about neoclassic. Neoclassicism refers to artists who look back to the the classic period of Greek or Roman art, just to give them inspiration, and sometimes use the figures, the figures from the various myths of the Greeks and the Romans. And the first one, by Canova, is called Cupid and Psyche. Canova was the leading neoclassic sculptor of 18th century marble. And this plaster cast is in the Metropolitan Museum, which is meant to be viewed on three sides. It's against, well, it's not really, in fact, it's against the wall now, but at one point it was in the middle of the floor, okay? They moved it. So you walk around it. What you have is a rocky outcropping, all right? And there is Psyche seated on the rocks. There were also the drapery, the ever-present drapery is there to show a contrast between the smoothness of her skin and the drapery. And Cupid has come, and he is embracing her. It is the pattern, beautiful patterns are created by the wings, by the embracing couple. It looks a little bit saccharine to 21st century eyes, but it is absolutely a marvelous work of art. As you walk around it, I'm going to show you this. Look at how a beautiful circle is created by his arms embracing her and her arms embracing him. And then, of course, there are the wings above that, which forms another pyramid. If you look at the wings, the negative space between the wings, we have a pyramid again, don't we? Of course, a triangle, shall I say, all right? But this here, and we also have a lot of contortions because she's seated sideways, and she reaches backward for him. And he has just alighted, and he reaches down for her, and she's reaching up for him. And it is just, this is absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And to think that was all done in marble. Now, the next one. Here is, of course, Rodin's The Kiss. He was the most famous sculptor in 19th century France. A number of copies exist, including this one at the Metropolitan Museum. Exploitation of marble to stimulate every muscle, not exploitation of marble, not bronze, to simulate every muscle and the tendons. Note how beautifully his hand rests on her hip. It's the most readily identifiable modern sculpture. Everybody knows that that's Rodin's The Kiss. It's based on the story of the lovers Francesco da Rimini and Paolo Malatesta in Dante's Divine Comedy, who described their passion as they read the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. And that is the book that is in Paolo's hand, on the extreme right there. Now, they were, by the way, Francesco da Rimini and Paolo Malatesta were later killed by her jealous husband. And again, note the hand on the hip and how they are embraced so beautifully. His arms around her and her arms around him. And she leans back. There's a sense of movement there. Now here is another Rodin, the Thinker. Now this is the bronze. As I said, he was the most famous sculptor in 19th century France. A number of copies exist, including one in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This one, however, is outdoors. And we see the exploitation of, this is the bronze. He did this in bronze. The exploitation of the bronze to stimulate every muscle and tendon that result in an exaggerated but very powerful anatomy. You can see every one of the muscles in his leg. And if you look at his knees, you can see, and look at the back. You don't see the whole back, but you can see that the muscles there are almost, so well developed and sticking out almost as if he's been on steroids or something. But there are a number of copies of this. This is one that's kept outdoors, but the Metropolitan has one which is inside. Now another one, I believe this is also at the Met, called The Hand of God. Now this one you have to walk around. It's on a plinth and you walk around it. The beautifully sculptured hand emerges from the marble, holding the raw material of creation, from which we see a man being formed in the image of God. Another sculpture which is meant to be viewed in the round, all right? Because look at the way the hand is. The hand comes up this way, right? So you have to walk around it. All right. Now I'm going to show you this one. This is another example of neoclassic sculpture, and it was done by a woman. The woman's name was Emma Stebbins, and this is the Angel of the Waters, the sculpture that's at the lake in Central Park in New York. And this picture was taken. I did not take this picture. I've never seen the sculpture. I have to get myself there one day. This picture was taken in the fall, which is obviously ideal because you get this lovely golden, all the leaves falling, this lovely golden leaves as a backdrop for this painting. I'm sorry, for the sculpture. The sculpture graces a fountain in New York Central Park. The commission was awarded in 1862 with the influence of Emma Stebbins' brother, who was the president of the Central Park Commissioners. So she got the recommendation. She got the commission, all right? And it turned out to be absolutely lovely. The sculpture flows, and at the very bottom, there is a base with children around the base. The base is formed basically like a tree trunk, so it blends with the bucolic setting of the Central Park. The figure may very well be inspired by the Nike of Samothrace. Look at the wings. Look at the wings. Now, Emma Stebbins came from a very wealthy family, and she was also the lesbian lover of an actress named Charlotte Cushman, who was very famous at the time on the stage of New York and stages of New York. She may also have influenced the commission, but it was really something that worked out so beautifully. And just, again, a woman sculptor, which was very unusual then. Yes?
I was watching the Gilded Age, that show that's on HBO now, and they have that statue in the show, and they were actually having a meeting and they're talking about it.
I see. Thank you. Now, we've been seeing a lot of sculptures of kisses. And I did this deliberately because we're going into the 20th century, and I'm going to show you a different kind of kiss. This one, Brancusi's The Kiss. All this is a block of marble, and it has been incised to give the feeling, or to show. He's taken away a minimal amount from that piece of stone just to show a couple kissing. You know, and their arms are around each other. She's got long hair, and you can see a suggestion of her breast, so you know that she's the one on the right is the woman, the one on the left is the man. But it is a minimalist sculpture. It has, in other words, what he did was simply take out the extraneous pieces and just carve in certain lines which delineate the figures. In other words, it's as I said, minimal amount of stone taken out. Very, very minimal. But it's the kiss. And we've seen two other kisses, but this is a 20th century kiss. It's a solid cubical form, which is not so much carved out as incised. The two figures appear one, and yet they are clearly distinguishable. So he has reduced the action of a kiss to its actual essence. Now there is a triangle that is created by the hair and the arms. It has a childlike quality to it because the eyes are on the side of the head, very much a childlike quality, but still it is extremely sophisticated because he did it with just a block of stone. So in other words, there is, again, the undercurrent of a childlike sculpture, but quite sophisticated. Now here is another one of Brancusi's, called Mademoiselle Pagani. Now here we see the Cubist influence, reduced to the most elemental shapes, creating a harmonious flow of line. Now this is something you could walk around, because first of all you have the oval head. The head is shaped almost like an egg, and if you look at the eyes, they are almost also egg-shaped, and then we have the curves of the eyebrows, and the the curve of the eyebrow goes into the nose, all right, creating another pattern there. And then her hands are resting this way. So we have a sense of motion starting from her wrists and completely around. So it is it's a completely a circle within a circle, shall we say. The diagonal of the arms completes the circle, and it is completed, a complete circle. And it's beautifully done, just beautiful. And again, very, very minimalist. There is no, in fact, she doesn't have any hair. It's very minimalist, and she's just trying to get the essence of the lady. Just the essence. No fripperies, just the essence. This also is another work. There are a number of copies of these, by the way. This one is called Bird in Space. It's a lyrical sense of flight. The curve of the bird encourages one to walk around it and imagine the changing forms of the negative spaces around the figure. Again, you've got to look at the space, but when this is in a museum, this will be freestanding, and there will be a light above it, because it's very, very shiny metal, and you will walk around it, and it's just marvelous. Bird in space, because the bird has folded back his wings. There were no wings; it's just the bird soaring. Now let's go to something else. Here is another sculpture that you have to look at in a different way. It's called Unique Forms of Continuity in Space by Boccioni, who was a sculptor around the 1920s. Here again is a cubist sculpture of a standing figure, a striding figure that has been re-envisioned by Boccioni into geometric planes, voids, and space. Look at the negative space created by the two legs, all right? And he appears to be wearing plates of armor, does he not? Yes. And we don't see the face, we don't see the arms, but it looks like it's all plates of armor put together to have unique forms of continuity in space. And each one of these plates flow into the next plate. This flows into this, and this flows into that, does it not? So we have a one form, but the forms that make up that one form flow into one another. There is also here, besides a sense of movement, a sense of the malleability of the form and the material. He had to sculpt. Now this is in bronze, so naturally it had to be sculpted. It also had to be certain elements of each piece would be shined up, and other elements might be a little bit left a little bit rougher, so that you get certain highlights here and here and here, and you can follow. Look at this. Look at the highlight right here. Another one over here. Another one over here. It makes you move your eye in that direction. This is not done haphazardly. I assure you, he did many sketches and did an awful lot of threw out a lot of sketches and decided which one would work before he began working in the metal like this. Now remember, at the very beginning of our lecture, I talked about the Greek kudos, and we saw the archaic kudos. Well, here is a reinterpretation in the 20th century of a kudos. And this is Osamu Noguchi, who worked as an assistant to Brancusi in 1927, where he learned to carve stone and wood. He uses a classic medium, stone, and a title, but the piece is purely 20th century. Pure abstraction. The work appears to be pieces that have been screwed together creating a form that encapsulates the negative space, and that then becomes necessary to complete the figure. You notice there is quite a bit of negative space there. There's the round hole, then there's this rectangle in the middle with what appears to be a screw going through it, and then there is another negative piece between where the backbone is all the way down to where the leg would be. And in other words, the negative space finishes the figure, and you have to think of the negative space that surrounds that. Now, this is a sculpture you would not walk around. You would look at it straight on. You would not walk around this. Straight on, okay? Now, Noguchi also went on and did the stainless steel Art Deco bas-relief entitled News above the main door of 50 Rockefeller Center. At that time, it was the largest bas-relief in the world, made of stainless steel, and the Associated Press was headquartered at Rock Center, so again, it was like telling you who was in the building. Now you can see that this obviously was a press photo, because at the very bottom we see Noguchi. He's wearing goggles because he's working with metal, of course, and then in the middle is the door, and then there on that side is the oh yes, the place in Boston where this actually was the foundry where they actually did the piece, because this is a very large piece and it was done in a foundry as with many works. For example, the works of Frank Stella and others are done at foundries where they have the equipment, these huge furnaces, and these, you have to have a cavernous room in order to do these, to execute these particular works. So that's still there, and you can still, when the next time you go to New York, again, it's public sculpture. We are getting into public sculpture, where sculpture is outside and it is for everyone to enjoy. You don't have to go into a museum. This is directly above, it's behind the Prometheus statue, directly above the main door. It's still there. Now here is another one called Sculpture Concrete. It's a concrete sculpture, but it's not made of concrete. It's made of bronze. But the idea of concrete, like a concrete idea, as a solid idea, okay? Now what we have here, Arp was the founder of the Dada movement. The emphasis here is on the irrational, hence the babyish term for an art movement, Dada. Originated in World War I, because it was a negative kind of approach to life, because life is ridiculous and empty with, well, the war, and also at that time there was a pandemic. All right, there was the World War I and the pandemic were kind of crisscrossed each other, and so this is not made, as I said, it's not made of concrete. But art used these biomorphic forms in the 1930s. Calder, in his sculptures, was also to use these biomorphic forms. In other words, biology and morphic, that it's like a cell, or like, for example, the coronavirus that morphs into something else and has these spikes coming off it. It looks like something from outer space when you look at that particular virus. But this is what he does here. It has a push-pull quality to it, as the forms appear to be trying to split off from each other, like it was two cells splitting off and making two, and then splitting off again and making four. Now, to appreciate this, you have to walk around that form. That is the best way of appreciating it. And you've got to think of the space that's around it, because the space that is around it completes the sculpture. That you must look at all the time, especially with things like this. But it can create, as you walk around it, it creates so many different images or different views. If you let's say, now it's sitting on a square plinth. So if you walk around it 4 times, you'll get one view. But if you walk around it 8 times, let's say you do, and you just do it this way, and you walk sideways, you'll get a myriad perspectives from where you are standing, and that's what you want to look for. This is the reason why when you confront a sculpture like this, there's no color, and the title of it is rather vague, Sculpture Concrete. And of course he's being funny because it's not concrete, it's bronze, all right? So this is the kind of thing that it challenges your vision, but it also challenges you in your head. Now, I'm going to show you another challenge. This one, done by a woman. Merit to Oppenheim. It's called the Fur Covered Teacup. It's also surrealist. Louis Sullivan, the famous architect and inspiration for Frank Lloyd Wright, said, quote, "Form follows function." Now, this witty piece has the form of a teacup, but its function is lost by use of fur as a material for its construction. Thus, it is a totally useless object. In other words, the form cannot fill its function because it's made of fur. And this is at the Museum of Modern Art, and it's considered a very, very iconic piece of sculpture from the Surrealist period. Now, the next. A sculpture from 1950, directly after World War II. And it's called The Walking Man. Well, here we see an attenuated skeletal man strides on spindly legs. He looks like he could possibly fall over. This was done, as I said, after World War II. We, at that time, have the atomic bomb, the hydrogen bomb to contend with, Korea, a resurgent Russia rattling the cage. Gee, what did I hear about that, huh? And bomb drills in elementary schools. Is it any wonder he has a massive anxiety compounded by the model bronze? This is bronze, but it looks like it's been through the ringer, doesn't it? It's not smooth, it's not finished. It really looks like he's got a far way to go on this. Now, there he is, striding forward, very, very attenuated. He's very thin. Obviously, he hasn't had very much to eat, okay? He strides forward to an uncertain future. This sold in February of 2010 for $104.3 million in London, which was a record for Giacometti. Now, everybody in the family, many families have a dog. And a man has to have a dog, doesn't he? Of course, a man takes his pet out for a walk. Well, here's the walking man's walking dog, and there it is. That's Giacometti's dog. The walking man's dog echoes his master's behavior and seems ready to collapse from hunger as he sniffs the ground. It is said that some people look like their dog, but here the dog mirrors his master. Okay, all right. Now, the next one I'm going to show you is Richard Serra. And this is the torqued ellipse. Serra works in steel, creating massive works which can be overwhelming. By the way, he has to have these done at a particular foundry. You have to have a huge furnace and whatnot to be able to pull these sheets out and then bend them while they're still warm, into the shape that he wants. Now, I once saw at the museum in, not in Barcelona, but in the Frank Gehry Museum in Bilbao, where there was an exhibition of Richard Serra's sculpture. And it can be overwhelming when you enter the room. One must walk within the pieces. And for me, it was a very daunting process because you're walking and it's very narrow and you don't know if you're going to make it. But I thought about it last night. I was looking at this. I remembered when I was walking in Petra in Jordan. Now, Petra is a canyon you walk. You're basically 300 feet below sea level. And you're walking through these these massive granite walls on either side, and as you're walking, you realize you're walking toward what looks like a dead end. But when you get close enough, you realize it's not a dead end and you make a turn. Well, this is the same thing with Richard Serra's sculptures. And it's very daunting because the way they all look like they're almost ready to cave in on you. And I said to myself, oh God, I hope it doesn't fall, and I'm walking through it. It is quite an experience to walk through this. Now, Serra makes the material as malleable as possible and takes it to its outer limits to create a unique environment. I'm going to show you another series of sculptures. One picture here called The Matter of Time. Now, again, the title is very Matter of Time, all right? It took me a lot of time to do that. Obviously, it took him a lot of time. Without a doubt, this is not something that could be done in one day. He was lucky if he finished this thing in maybe a year's time. But some of these pieces you can walk into, but then you've got to back out. Now, if you look at the fourth piece there are 3 pieces of this undulating wall, but you can peek into it, but you couldn't possibly walk through it unless you were really super skinny. So it's marvelous. It really is. And it's something that you have to experience. It's almost like a happening. You have to experience it. The sculpture is not delineating an object, it's delineating an idea. And you have to try and figure out what the idea is. In other words, you have got to relate yourself to this. And if it doesn't turn you on, you say, well, I don't really, he really did a nice job on it, but I don't know. I'm not sure what he's trying to say here. But you've got to admit, this stuff stands. It isn't leaning, and it stands on very, very little. He must know. He must be masterful at knowing the amount of metal and the size of it and the width of it and everything else, and how much can he bend it before it's going to fall over, okay? So he must be quite masterful at this, because otherwise that would be collapsing all over the place. Now, this is in a museum, but there are, as I mentioned to you, sculptures that are in public places. And 2 of the most famous of all is Robert Indiana's Love, which was used in a United States postage stamp. And here is one example of Love. This is the Love that's in Philadelphia, and it's above the traffic. And there is the Love. And it's always with the O is always tilted a little bit, okay? And by the way, there's also one in New York City on 6th Avenue at around 48th or 49th Street. And people are, and it's a red one. It's all red, but it's on the ground. It's not it's on the ground, on the corner. And people are always posing in front of it and taking pictures, and people who just become engaged go in front of it, and somebody takes their picture and whatnot. Now, the other one is in Kansas. This is in the University of Kansas. And this is a blue and green Love. The red one was from 1976, and this one is from 1980. It's much loved and a recognized icon in stamps and paintings. The stencil, again, he uses the stencils, those old-fashioned stencils. If you wanted to make letters, you bought those stencils in the stationery store. And those are the stenciled letters, and he turned them around and made a work of art out of it. Note the tipped O. Note the negative spaces, because the negative spaces add, because this is outside, the negative spaces add a series of shadows and light. And notice that it's blue, but the interior of the L is green, and and other colors as well, because he knows that the sun's rays will go through it, and you will see all these colors. So that it really pops out to you. It truly does. Now, another famous outdoor sculpture is by Jeff Koons, and this one. This is Jeff Koons's puppy. Now, these pictures were taken by me. This was taken, the one on the left, the right, the one on the right was taken. I had a jeweler friend who has his offices in Rockefeller Center on the 7th floor. And in his office, I could look down on Rockefeller Center, and that's how I took that picture. I said, Chris, I said, could I go in there and take a picture? I would love to see, what it looked like from. So that picture was taken from the 7th floor of the building in Rockefeller Center. And this one was taken when I simply walked there. Now this is the puppy is a West Highland Terrier, and he rules Rockefeller Center. This was done, I think it was there at around 2009 or 2010. He is adorable, well-fed, and everybody's favorite. It's an engineering marble, by the way. First of all, it's 43 feet tall. Stainless steel sections hold over 25 tons of soil with an internal irrigation system. The first one was placed in Sydney in 1996 has been called the 7th wonder of the world. The other one, the one that I have seen prior to this, is the one in Bilbao, Spain. He stands here above Paul Manship's statue of Prometheus. More than 70,000 plants bedeck the structure. You have a lot of plants in it. And the Rock Center is the most famous public space in the world, and it works beautifully and is a true delight. Unfortunately, he's not there permanently because that's where the tree grows at Christmas time, okay? So now I'm going to show you one more picture that I took of it. There it is in front of it with the waterfall, and there he is. Now, this is the one that's in Bilbao. And if you look at them, they each have their own character. This one has an awful lot of character, I think, because of the fact that they varied the colors, they varied not only the colors, but also the textures of the flowers. This one, the one on the right, it looks to me a bit more static. This one looks far more interesting to me. But in other words, you can create the character of the puppy by what you put into it, you see. There is a complete difference. You agree with me that that's a complete difference there? Yeah. But the one, I just love the one in Bilbao. I fell in love with him. I really did. Of course, I'm a dog lover. I mean, everybody loves dogs, I think. But anyway, now he was put in Bilbao in 1996. So he's been there a very long time indeed. And I hope he's still there if I ever get back, I hope he's still there waiting for me. Now let's stay with Jeff Koons. Here's another one he did. Taking the kids' balloons and making balloon sculptures. This was a few years ago. This was on the roof of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And because it was on the roof and the sun is shining, you can see your reflection, you can see all these wonderful reflections as you walk around it, and you laugh at it, because it's really very cute. With all the little balloon thing, the way it ties off is the little puppy's mouth, and the other little ties. It's just absolutely fabulous. And of course, it's in this bright, shiny yellow, so that when the sun hits it, it's just like wow, And here is another one. Now this is the kind of Valentine candy you find wrapped in that red cellophane with a bow, but it's standing on the tip of the heart. And it's just so marvelous. Again, and there is the skyline of Manhattan behind it. What could be better than that? What more fun can you have than that, I loved going up there, just walking around that, and you see yourself reflected, and of course the metal takes on kind of a watery look. Now this, for example, it looks kind of watery, and you see the shadowing right there, and and of course even that bow, that giant bow, is the same material as well, and to my mind, it's just wonderful. Now, my last one that I'm going to show you is a very, very strange one. It's done by Barton Banishes. Barton Banishes died in 2012. He was a Slovak, from a Slovak family, born in Hackensack, New Jersey. I found that out today yesterday when I looked to get more information on him. Born in Hackensack and lived in New York City. And he was a sculptor who took junk, basically, and discarded things and turned them into sculpture. But he is most famous for taking shredded US currency that he would buy from the treasury and turn it into a sculpture. So I am showing you this one, which always has fascinated me. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, I put this in 2 days ago. Yes, I'm sorry. The Venice one is the last one. I put this in. This is Jasper John's Split Star from 2017. This sculpture was installed in the World Trade Center in November last year by Frank Stella, who is a sculptor and an artist. It is a replacement in the World Trade Center for two paintings that he had done, which were destroyed when the two towers came down. The word Jasper refers to his friend Jasper Johns and his paintings. We have 6 geometric grids here that rest on an aluminum base that take the look of a flower petal or a flower opening up. It was installed, as I said, in November of last year under the supervision of Stella, who is 85 years old and still working. So there's a lot to be said to work until you're 85, okay? Now, and you can see how large it is because there is the crane putting it in place. So if you have a chance on a Sunday morning, early in the morning, now that the weather is getting better and you know that the light is light much earlier, get into the car, drive into New York at around 7 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock in the morning, and go down to the World Trade Center. I can guarantee you nobody will be there except you. You can enjoy it, you can walk around it, you can take pictures, and you can say, well, let's look at the negative space here, because this is steel, and it's going to catch the light, and it's going to catch the sun, and it's going to catch the shadows, and it's just absolutely wonderful. I would suggest you do it on a Sunday morning. You won't have trouble finding a parking spot, and there'll be nobody there because everybody's still sleeping, and you could absolutely enjoy something like this by yourself or with a friend of yours. You two of you go in there and you take pictures of it and pose in front of it, and you'll have a ball. I love New York on a Sunday morning because it's quiet, and it's almost like I have it all to myself. Okay, now the last one. This is Banish. This is Barton Banishes. There's the Botticelli's Venus. Remember I mentioned Botticelli's Venus. And on the left is Banish's take on the Renaissance painting by Botticelli. He takes scraps and throwaways, as I said. Here he uses US currency and creates a modern Venus. But it sets up a lot of questions in your mind. Do you need money to be a Venus today? Or will being made of money turn you into one? All right, she's made of money and she's Venus, so maybe having a lot of money, you can turn yourself into a Venus. Banish died in 2012 of kidney failure, but this is something like this. I saw the actual sculpture itself. I went into a gallery, and they didn't let me take a picture, but they said, we have a slide. And I remember the slide, I had to give them the exact amount of money. So I had to ask my date to give me the money, and I reimbursed him because it was $2 or something, and I gave him a $5, and she said, we don't have any change, and I wanted the slide. So I said, can you give me the money? I'll give it to you. So anyway, and this is taken from the slide. And I just was absolutely intrigued with it, absolutely intrigued. But that's part of loving art and loving sculpture. And I hope that I have, in a sense, opened up your eyes a little wider to sculpture so that when you approach it, you don't have to say, gee, what is that all about, you know? You remember you have to walk around it, you have to take it for take the title for what it's worth, and you've got to look at the space around it, and then you can appreciate it ever so much more. I want to thank you all for coming here and spending your evening with me, and I hope to see you all again. Thank you very much.
It was lovely.